Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Bug Watch. I'm your host, Davey, aka Swissley, and I am joined by the effervescent, the four and a half wins, JP. JP, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Right off the back of my first 2-day event in a hot second, so still feeling a little bit of the kickback from that after a long 5 games, but feeling good after it.
I bet your 6++ jersey's feeling it after you wore it day one, washed it on the night, and then wore it again day 2.
Yes, because I have an amazing fiance.
That's marriage material, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
That's why I put a ring. That's why I put a ring on that finger and didn't let it go.
Indeed. Cool. Well, we are here today. We've had another 2 weeks of the meta go past us. So we've got some great, cool lists to talk to you about there. We've also got JP talking a bit about his GT that he did over the weekend at Tabletop Republic. Wonderful venue. Get a chance to go, get down there. It's very, very cool. And then we've also got a bit of a competition, which we'll wait until the room's full before we go into that, because we don't want to do it with such few folk watching, for want of a better phrase. But yeah, let's get into it. So, JP, we'll go into your tournament tomorrow. Not tomorrow, God. It's really hot, right? So, let's just put a line here. It is so hot in the UK. I am on my second beer, and I'm still really warm. I'm hoping the second beer cools me right down. We'll see if that actually happens or not. Right. Whew. How was yesterday, JP? We'll go into the games and a bit more about the list, but did you enjoy the event?
Oh, it was awesome. It was really good fun. I had gone in with no expectations of any sort of high performance. I decided that, because I've put so much pressure on, I didn't put a lot of pressure on myself in Nottingham, but definitely when I went to Oxford, I probably put a bit of pressure on myself to try and perform. I did, obviously, in hindsight, I did, but it was definitely kind of I need to I want to see how well I can do. So this one was it's a local one. I know I normally play at the store because it's where I do my leagues that I've been doing. And I kind of just wanted to get to a point where I'm like, you know what? I just would rather go and play units I want to play, not worry too much about is the army 100% competitive, but just play stuff I wanted to play. And as we'll talk about later, it actually ended up going much better than I thought it was going to go. It's an awesome venue. I really like TTR as a venue. They play on tables that you can stand at, quite comfortably without leaning over. So I'm 6'3", so I'm not the shortest person in the world. So when you're playing on UKTC, you do find yourself bending over a lot. TTR's a bit higher up, which is quite nice.
I find myself bending over a lot because I'm 2'3" or something like that, but that's just me. Awesome, good, all right. So I've been to some events there before. I found them really, really nice as well. There's a really good bunch of regulars that are there as well. Yeah. Yourself included. You've got Fristo as well, and Mr. Sidhu. Really, really cool, cool regulars. And you can tell us how you did. How did you do?
I did. So I did much better than expected. I went 3 wins, 1 draw, and a loss. My loss was in the final round, playing for the tournament win, which was not where I expected to be when I walked into the tournament on day 1, and especially after getting the draw in round 2 versus my arch nemesis Sam and his Chaos Space Marines. So I got into the final round playing for the tournament win. Unfortunately, dice happen. And I still ended up finishing 5th, so I'm not going to complain too much about it. Especially taking the list I did and playing for the event win in the final round was definitely
such a competitive field where the last game you could come 1st or 5th.
Yes, yeah, it was a bit of a wild one. I'm not going to lie.
Absolutely,
having the draw against Sam just really knocked it because there was always going to be between 2 and 3 people on 4 wins. Which meant that having only 3 wins and a draw meant that if I did lose, I was automatically dropping down to the highest of the 3s and below the 4s. Yeah. But because obviously in the final round there was only there were only 2 of us undefeated. If I did win the final round, I went 4-0-1, which would have given me the event win, which would have been absolutely wild considering just my expectations of the event, which was great. And I feel I haven't really, to be honest, spent much time thinking about it. Had to think about it when I get home, and I don't think I would have really done anything different given the scenario 100 times, especially the final game. I was talking to Martin afterwards. Despite what happened, I might have made some small changes, like strat reserve the Biovore and the Pyrovore, and not just given his indirect pieces some valid targets to shoot at. I would have made exactly the same deployment decisions and play decisions 100 times out of 100 looking back on their game. So I think that it was kind of a big, quite a nice feeling that I don't look back and think, oh, I could have done this, I would have won this. I just look back, I had a great amount of fun, won 3 games, drew 1 against Sam, and then lost to Martin in what looks like a landslide, but it was potentially would have been a lot closer had a few things gone my way at any point in the game. So, it was an awesome tournament. Really, really enjoyed it.
Very cool, man. Very cool. Well, as I say, I've got the event here so we can talk about it in a bit, but we'll get to that towards the end. Let's see who's in the chat. We've got Christopher Richardson, would probably my favourite post so far, my favourite comment so far. Right, dinner is on. I've just cracked open a beer, and I'm ready to try 4 different lists I don't have the models for. And then he said, it's 7:45, not 7. Fine, I'll come back later. And then I'm back. Don't worry. I remembered the show can start now, Davey. So thank you very much, Christopher, for that inner monologue. Big fan of that. My camera's stopped. That's very
yes. I was going to say, just for those who are watching, Swizzly has actually frozen, but is still talking.
Yes, yes, I am not a ventriloquist. All right, well, let's go on with it. Let's go. We've got Hercules Balls in the chat as well. Eager to hear this show. Yes. That me too. All right, so a really straightforward one, guys. We're just going to talk a few lists. I've heard you like Broodlords. For some reason, I've forgotten to cut out part of the image here, so good job. Right, so one of the things that we've seen in the last couple of weeks is in the last 2, like the weeks before, it was like the Vanguard onslaught lists were kind of like. They were.
Okay, Davey has actually just left the planet. I will continue to talk going forward. Thank you, Scrivo. I do appreciate you very much. Welcome to the show. Good to have you on board. Come and basically look at Swizzly's swirly screen. I'm sure he will return soon. But like Swizzly was saying, we've seen quite a lot of different detachments coming up, and I think that a lot of the popularity has driven out of the fact that Vanguard Onslaught is now actually like a very valid and one of the top detachments. It's been great. In fact, Dave has now gone so much that his computer's died, and we have no screenshot anymore. So I'm just going to keep talking because the show is now mine. Bugwatch belongs to Jompy Warhammer, and Swizzly has been removed from the premises. But thank you for those who have joined. And so far, Davey is coming back. Oh, he's back.
Hello. Sorry about that.
You back? Yeah, he's back.
I'm kind of back. Yeah. All right, there we go. Right, we're back. Yeah. So I think John was saying there, I could hear you guys, but you couldn't hear me. Like we've seen a lot of, like, set up the Nexus was taking the wheel. It's like, okay, I'm the big dog here, but we have seen a lot of Vanguard onslaught lists do really well in the last 2 weeks. A lot of them, let's be honest, are hitting 4 wins. Which is really interesting because is Vanguard Onslaught our classic 4-win detachment, right? It could very well be that. But let's have a look at some of these performances. We've got friend of the show, Hristo Nikolov. He was at the same event that John was at. He got 4th place with Vanguard Onslaught. We're looking at 2 Broodlords, a Winged Prime, 2 times 10 Gargoyles, a Biovore, which is one of the only lists to actually include the Biovore. If we look at these other 2 lists, 2 times 10 Genestealers, 3 Lictors, a Pyrovore, 6 Raveners, 6 Melee Warriors, 3 Zoanthropes, a Maliceptor, and 3 Exocrine. 3 Exocrine feels like cheating, right? No?
They're great.
They're great. I used to do it. I can't really complain too much. But no, you actually played against this list, John. Tell us a little bit about it.
I have to apologize to everyone who does watch this video. I am the one loss that Hristo took all tournament. He played like an absolute hero all tournament, and unfortunately, just the stat checky nature of my army was just too much for Vanguard Onslaught to deal with. Having watched him play the rest of the tournament, like the triple exocrine keeps a lot of armies very honest. Like you'd be surprised at how much damage just 3 standard exocrines in any detachment do nowadays. But also this army can really struggle to pop transports. The exocrines give you a way of popping up in the transports for you to then hit the internals with the Raveners, the Warriors, and the Genestealers of Aristo. Likely will make some changes to this list. I think he was a bit disappointed with the Maleceptor, and the Raveners weren't necessarily the numbers he'd want to be playing in sort of the WTC when he gets there. So I think going forward there will be changes to the list. But the list played incredibly well. Managed to beat.
I think his words were he's taking a worse version of his WTC list.
Yeah, because of
he is a player for Team Bulgaria. If those who don't know,
I think he's planning on playing triple Genestealer at WTC, and I did say he could have asked me to borrow them, but he'd forgotten that I own 10 Genestealers, so I apologised and we carried on. But no, the list, honestly, for me, this is one of the best lists of Vanguard Onslaught I've seen play. It does the exocrines do shore up some of your more difficult matchups because, like, a full melee army generally has to respect triple exocrine rather than yeeting across the board and going, well, there's nothing you can really do. Triple exocrine rocks around the corner and picks up a lot of melee stuff. Like I played against Blood Angels and I only had 2 exocrines, and 2 exocrines killed almost 3/4 of a Death Company unit on their own. Because the damage 3, like even Lamartis and the 6 that feel no pain, there's a very high, and AP 3, like they're on a 6-up save to start with. The damage output of exocrines into marine bodies is just absolutely obnoxious, and it does keep a lot of armies honest. The 3 zone throats, I think, are going to get cut. They were kind of a concession to transports. So I think that Christo realised that they weren't that good. But no, the rest of the army is great. It has so much output in melee versus your kind of average army that I think it's just a really good place to go. And I also feel that it kind of proves that the army doesn't need the Hive Tyrants or the Neuro Tyrants or any of kind of that thing, and just kind of functions as more of a triple threat army plus supporting structure. And I think it was really, really good.
Yeah. Were both 10-man Genestealer units in your face turn 1?
No.
No. Okay, that's interesting.
So when I
did you go first on him?
I went first. So when I played against Hristo, we played on Search and Destroy, which is the one where you're in table quarters with 9 inches from the center.
Yeah.
The challenge for Hristo is I put 2 Maleceptors behind terrain on the line, and 10 Genestealers don't do that much damage to Maleceptors.
No.
And because I went first, so I got to play. So I'll go back slightly. So I got to play Hristo on Burden of Trust, which is the one where you score 4 points for each objective you hold in no man's land. You don't score for holding your home objective, which I think gave me an intrinsic advantage because Hristo can't just pick an objective and sit on his home and score points. He actually has to come and play the game, and that's where I want to be. Because in a pure fight, the stat checky nature of triple Maleceptor Norn just absolutely does win out in those matchups. So I think I was lucky in the mission we played because I can put a Norn on one objective. The only thing that can take a Norn off that is 10 Gargoyles. He's giving away an important part of his army. And the challenge for Vanguard Onslaught is it almost cannot kill a Norn that's on an objective because Genestealers suddenly give it a better save. You get 4 up feel no pain versus all the mortals.
Yeah.
And then you feel much like at least half of the
Oh, your mic's gone funny, mate. You sound like you're underwater a little bit.
Oh, does it? Oh,
I'll better again. Yeah. Then as soon as you realise, it's like, yep, okay.
Yeah. The list is honestly really, really good. And I think if you're against matchups that struggle to deal with the pressure, you can full on primary denial. But if we purely take the instance of the matchup I played, I've got Carnifex Brood, which absolutely mullers Genestealer units. So it's kind of Christo has to play this really interesting game. Plus, he went second, which means he can play a bit more passive. And I think in hindsight, either way, it's a rough game. But I think that it's a very. What I did find Hristo's version is incredibly flexible because it can do both the offensive game plan of throw 20 Genestealers and in your face turn 1. But also it can play the more kind of tradey game style with the Lictors, the Warriors, and the Genestealers, but also having access to the 6 Raveners and the Exocrines, you can play a bit more of a tradey game.
Yeah, the exocrines are great. I think I said it in my Vanguard video. Like, you have to you have to keep your opponent honest, because if you're just all melee, your opponent can just stand where they want. So those
Yeah.
exocrines, sure, they might not kill a knight. They might kill a knight, but they might not. But your opponent still can't take that risk. So they do have to deploy and take the right precautions to avoid just getting mullered by exocrines, right? So no, it's really interesting, really interesting. And then if we go on to so well done to Christo, by the way. Fourth place is great there, and having only one loss to the one and only JP, that's not bad either. And JP, we'll go into it in a sec, but playing Crusher Stampede. So one of the things I would call out is, Vanguard in the video we did recently, their big failure point is high toughness, and you had oodles and noodles of that. Cool. Let's go on to Logan French, who got 8th place at Battle of the Bridge. So I think, again, this lad won 4, if I'm right. Won 4 and lost 1. But again, a very different Vanguard Onslaught list. We've got Swarm Lord in here. Then, I heard you like Brood Lords. 3 Brood Lords. 1 Hive Tyrant. 1 Neuro Tyrant. That's a lot of characters for a Vanguard Onslaught list, I think, as well. None of them, except for the Brood Lords, with the Vanguard Onslaught keyword. Then we've got 10 Hormigants. We've got 3 times 10 Genestealers to go with the Broodlords. We've got a Lictor, 3 Von Ryans, maybe to stop Alpha Strikes, things like that. And 6 Zoanthropes to go with that Neuro Tyrant for maybe the turn 1 drop and shoot little group. Very fun. And then we've got a Morlock and a Rupture Cannon T-Fex. I've just wrote Rupture Cannon there. It's just on its own. So yeah, a really interesting one here. The Swarm Lord is quite the beast, obviously. We know he's very good at the moment, and he's got so much better since the balanced data slate. Move up into the middle of the table, perhaps after all those Genestealers have alpha struck their opponent. It's not a bad beta strike to have the Swarm Lord and a Hive Tyrant going in. I love the combo of having the Swarm Lord and a Hive Tyrant, because not only are you getting the free CP, but you're also getting a free strat. So you're getting basically 3 CP free every battle round, which is awesome. And that just opens the door for very easy surprise assaults, that one that makes them take a battle shock test, and just a bunch of other bits and bobs. So really quite nice, really quite nice. I suppose the question I have here is a little bit around doing actions and things like that. So perhaps obviously the Lictor, the Von Ryans, I think the Von Ryans die turn 1 maybe if your opponent goes first and they've got a decent melee threat. But yeah, I wonder about the secondaries here. He's done all right though. He's won 4 games, so really interesting, really interesting. Really, like, going 3 Broodlords sounds very cool. What else is in this? The Neuro Tyrant, so that leans into a bit of the Synapse piece, so you get -2 to battle shocks, Shadow of the Warp. However, a distinct lack of Synapse here. So you've only got the Hive Tyrant, the Swarm Lord, the Neuro Tyrant, who obviously gives it to stuff, so it's almost like just giving Synapse to stuff. Although it just counts as being in the Synapse aura, not having Synapse. And the Zoanthropes, which will probably be off the table to start with, come in and do bits and bobs. So yeah, very cool. What do you reckon of that one? What do you reckon to Swarm Lord in Vanguard Onslaught, JP?
It's a really interesting pick because it's alongside the Hive Tyrant. I do sometimes wonder if the Swarm Lord Hive Tyrant combination, which is 475 points, nearly a quarter of your army, is just a little bit too expensive in armies that don't protect it particularly well. It
was a lot of fun when I played it. Like, I have to say, it was really cool.
But you're also playing a monster detachment.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. And I did have Tyrant Guard there just because I thought, we need to protect these boys. And then it becomes even more expensive. But it was quite fun.
So for me, the big thing, and I think it was something that Haristo kind of identified a little bit in the chat we had, the Rupture Fex is actually a really interesting tech choice in Vanguard Onslaught, because generally, like we've been talking about, some armies can just stat check you out the game, and even 6 Zoanthropes, which still seem to have big guns, they don't always do the damage you need them to, and they're quite flimsy on the way back. The Rupture Fex doesn't die to random firepower. It laughs at a lot of stuff being T12, 16 wounds, 2-up save, and a blank ability. Mm-hmm. But the Rupture Cannon does keep a lot of, again, armies with heavy armor on it. So the potential of I would. I was
Mike's
having.
gone.
Sorry.
Your mic's got. There you go. It's better now.
So I was thinking about it when we were talking. When we were. I'm going to go. I think it's because my Ethernet cable's not plugged in. I need to go plug that in a second. When we were talking about it, I think the Rupture Effects plus Exocrine package just allows you to keep a lot of armies honest, because the Rupture Effects can one-shot a lot of vehicles with the change to D6 plus 6 damage. And again, I think you have to look at it in a way of how do you keep your opponents honest in a close melee focused army, and the Rupture Effects being 5 OC on its own, incredibly difficult to shift, especially in cover. I think it just gives that interesting play to not just have people basically do what they want, and they have to really respect your ability to actually kill stuff at range. So I think that's what this army's tried to play into. I think it's played into it a little bit too much with the Swarmlord Hive Tyrant as well, but I definitely think that the Zone Thropes, Rupture Effects, and I would be putting Zone Thropes in rather than one of the Swarmlord or the Hive Tyrant. I definitely think that's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, I find I guess if the Broodlord etc. are going forward first, it's then what is going in after that. You've got obviously the T-Fex, which is very nice. Obviously very difficult to shift. The Morlock can come up as well, and then you've got the Hive Tyrant. So that's the kind of second wave. It just, I suppose, it's very matchup dependent, but a very interesting list nonetheless. It's everything about Vanguard, and also like a lot that isn't about Vanguard. So it's quite interesting. And then we've got Scott Mayer. So Scott Mayer, the name of this list, I never put it on here, but the name of his list on BCP is Battle Shock is a Crutch or something along those lines. He was like, no, I'm not getting into that at all.
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong. You're right. Yeah, and it's a gamble for more. The thing I hate about Battleshock stuff, and the reason why I'm not playing Synaptic Nexus at the moment, is just when it's really fun all the time. It's good sometimes, because if your opponents just starts rolling good dice, maybe like 4 pluses on all their dice, and pass all their leaderships, then yeah, that sucks. So what have we got here? We've got a Neuro Tyrant, we've got the Swarmlord again, and we've got a Winged Prime. We've got 2x10 Hormagaunts, 10 Genestealers, a Lictor, 3 Raveners, 2 Rippers, 6 Melee Warriors, 3 Von Ryans, 6 Zoanthropes, a Maliceptor, an Exocrine, a Trigon, and a Rupture Effects. So for context, I had to make the font smaller on this entire page just to get that list in. Like, that is some list that's a lot of like MSU kind of. What do you reckon?
I have a lot of questions about the build. No Broodlord for the Genestealers. The 2 Rippers the 2 Rippers, which now cost the same as a Biovore, is an interesting one.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Like, personally, I literally don't understand that choice. Like, 2
I think
Rippers.
this one went 3. By the way, 3 wins and a draw, if I remember rightly. But he got 4th place, which is not nothing.
No, absolutely no. It's obviously performs. For me, this is it's a very strong list, but I don't know what the identity it's trying to play. I almost feel like this might be better in another detachment.
Yeah, perhaps.
So again, it's a nice variation to what you can see across kind of all 3 of these armies do have some substantial variance, and I'd go with like Haristos being the most kind of like Vanguard onslaught-y list, and then Scott's one trying to kind of fight against a few more things. The Rupture Effects, the Trigon, Exocrine, Maliceptor is just a lot of good, very good, strong monsters. The Maliceptor is obviously just great. I think it's arguably the best monster in Tyranids right now. But I do like the list. I question some of the choices, but I do think the 6 Zone Threat Neuro Tyrant brick is always good. And the ability to pick up the Trigon and Deep Strike 3 inches away is something that's definitely not to be sniffed at. Gets into some very interesting positions for actions, for charges, and then other things like that. So I think it's really good. I think it's a very interesting list.
I mean, no Broodlord here either, right? So everyone else has Broodlords except Scott. But we've got the Wing Prime. So I think what he's essentially doing is paying for the reach and paying for the redeploy.
Yeah.
So the reach from these melee threats, and then the redeploy, you can obviously, as you mentioned, the Trigon, the Zoes, maybe the 3 Von Ryans doing some actions and things, or the 3 Raveners rather. So obviously at the end, the Raveners get picked up anyway. Yeah, it's super interesting, right? It's just, but this is what I love about it when you see these innovations, and this is why I started doing the show in the first place, right? You see all this cool innovation, and you're just like, oh, that's really interesting. I tell you what, I wouldn't want to go into the middle of the board after killing those Gene Stealers and see a Maliceptor, a Trigon, a Rupturefex, and the Swarm Lord standing there, just like Logan's list. That's a beefy mid board that you're gonna have to get through. But yeah, really interesting.
And I do think that's something that people forget about, the fact that Tyranids can play that aggressive pressure in Vanguard Onslaught, but can also put a fair amount of just chunk and muscle in the middle of the board to just kind of brawl over what's left. I do think I think across all of these ones, I think the Scots list, I think you have to be a lot more careful with where you hit. Whereas like Logan's list and to an extent Hristo's, you can almost throw 10 Gene Stealers and a Broodlord away for denial very early on and not be impacted on your ability to continue to do it. Whereas I think that Scott's list is very much I have to be much more careful with how I use my aggressive units because I just don't have many of them. And they do a lot less damage by having less of them, having no Broodlord, for example. So I do think it's an interesting variation on the playstyle, which is why if I was going to play Vanguard Onslaught, I'd kind of towards a combination of Logan and Hristos versus Scots, personally.
I see that. The one last thing I'll add to this is I was watching just I don't know if anyone watches Play on Tabletop. Really great channel, really good battle reports. There's a guy in there called Space Marine Steve. He's on another channel where he talks about like events and things like that and other bits and bobs. And he was on with this guy and he's talking about his Tacoma Open, and he played against Steve. Oh, is it Trimble? I think it's Trimble. Sorry, one second. The dog is crying. 1 second. Let me let him out. Go on, let you go. Go on. No, you're going. Go on. The sausage gaunt is misbehaving himself. So yeah, he's playing this Chris Trimble guy, or Steve Trimble guy, and what happened? Really interesting. He has pictures of the game, and Steve Trimble's playing Vanguard Onslaught, and Steve Trimble has this really cool play where he puts the Morlocks out, and then as soon as his opponent moves anywhere near them, he just pulls both of them back just to deny the charge, and then the other stuff goes in. And I think it's such a cool play. If you are into Vanguard Onslaught, go and find that video. It's with Space Marine Steve. I can't remember what the channel's called, but they have a bunch of videos and stuff, and it's a really good view of that game and how Steve Trimble won that game. Cool. All right, let's get into the next one. So there's other detachments that are doing well as well. So we've got 2 Invasion Fleet lists here and Jacob Gould's Crusher. So we'll start with that one. He got 3rd place at Boise, which is awesome. He was playing Death Leaper, a Hive Tyrant, and a Neuro Tyrant. 2x10 Gargoyles, 2 Execrates, 2
this list won.
Say again?
Sorry, I thought this list won the event because it was on the Tactical Tortoise video today. I guess it must have been just undefeated.
I think maybe undefeated. I think it got 3rd, yeah. I might be wrong.
No.
A Lictor, a Maliceptor, a Neurolictor, a Non-Emissary, a Pyrovore, 3 Raveners, and a Rupturefex. So I think this is cool. I don't know what the terrain was like at Boise. I think it's play. Oh, is it player place still at those events? I don't know.
Don't know.
But for me, I mean, obviously we're going to talk about Crusher Stampede in a little bit. But man, Haruspex is. I'm not convinced by them personally.
Oh, after the weekend, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just so big that you can see them anywhere. Movement 8. They are only 125 points, so I'll give them that. But I think against some armies, they'll just die. Like, they've got no invuln. They've got a 3-up armor, probably with cover, right? Crusher Stampede is a detachment with no defense from shooting at all. So that's why I'm not keen on them. But hey, Jacob's gone and essentially, like, I think it was 4 wins and a draw. I might be wrong. And done really well with it. So fair play. Anything you could pick out about this that you're a big fan of?
It's a lot more chaff than my army had.
A little bit less than mine.
having played the Crusher list, the Haruspex actually has a really interesting place in the list. And actually, so for me personally, Um, if I was building a list, I would put old One Eye in as a solo unit before I put the first Haruspex in.
Yeah.
Um, but if you already have old One Eye, the Haruspex is an incredible monster to have access to. Mostly because generally in Tyranids, although this sounds counterintuitive, you don't have that many targets to get full use of the full rerolls to hit in melee. But Haruspex loves full rerolls to hit in melee.
Yeah.
One of the issues one of the reasons I dropped the Haruspex from Invasion Fleet quite quickly is because you didn't have the ability to reroll your hits, so you'd roll 14 attacks and you'd roll 6 misses, and you'd just be like, well, I did no damage anymore. Whereas in Crusher, it's much easier to pair it up with a Synapse model to give it strength 8, and also the full rerolls to hit just means that you just don't have those same issues. And those 4 big smash attacks, you are more likely to connect with the majority, if not all of them, by having access to that stratagem. For 125 points, that model does a lot of damage in melee.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I think if it was movement 10 or movement 9, I'd be a little bit more interested. But it's got such a big base. So all One Eye is great because you can put him right next to a wall, and then like his movement 8 counts for a lot. But the movement 8 on that thing is just so slow that I've just found personally. I mean, I'd love to take one. I love the model. I've not really played one for a long period of time since I've had them, and it was the first monster I actually bought because I was like, that's cool. And yeah. But hey, Jacob's done awesome with it there.
It's very good out of Strat Reserve.
Yeah, but then so's a One Eye, and so's a Trigon.
Don't get me wrong. Like it, I dislike the. It's weird. I like the Haruspex more than the Trigon in Crusher. Mostly because it is 45 points cheaper. Yeah,
sure. But, and hear me out, if your opponent is savvy, they will just make you bring it in from reserves in your deployment zone, right?
Yeah, there are. Don't get me wrong. There are issues with it. There is definitely an argument for the Trigon over the Haruspex. The 45 points, if you can afford it. I'm going to potentially reassess the list with the Trigon, but I just found that I probably need to relearn to play with my Trigons in Crusher versus Invasion Fleet. So it's going to be a little bit of learning experience. But no, I honestly think Crusher is a great place detachment to be, and I do think that Haruspex deserves a lot more of a look now in Crusher with the higher number of melee armies, because it just has a lot of attacks.
Yeah. Well, and as well, just to let you know, guys, I'll be releasing a video about Crusher Stampede. It comes out on Friday. Thanks to John Scrivo in the chat for editing it for me, but we'll be releasing that on Friday, talking about a few of my different thoughts on the detachment. Yeah, which is quite interesting, I think, anyway, personally. But one of the things I do talk about is Crusher Stampede generally lacks a lot of synapse, unless you're John and you've got an addiction to 3 Maleceptors. But if you in this list, actually, Jacob's kind of leaned into it a little bit. So he's got his Hive Tyrant, he's got his Neuro Tyrant, which obviously projects it. But then having that non-emissary is super useful because it will keep that. Obviously, it projects Synapse. And then finally, you've got the Neurolictor, which is doing that as well. So when you eventually Shadow the Warp and Battle Shock stuff, which is really cool, you then get the +1 to wound. Sorry, I've got a fly. Not anymore. But that one Neurolictor will do that work for you. I just wonder if I'd rather keep 30 points to myself and make that a normal Lictor and not have +1 to wound on monsters, because I'm probably wounding pretty well anyway.
Yeah, the Neurolictor is an interesting one in Crusher. I'm not sure. I mean, personally, I've never really been a huge fan, but that's just a personal choice. I like how cheap Lictors are and how much of a problem they can cause for opponents. Like, when you're forced to throw a unit away to do an action because you didn't have other stuff, the Lictor is such a great model because you're only sacrificing 55 points, and they legitimately have to shoot it rather than fight it in melee, because it will do a lot of damage before it goes away. Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. Invasion Fleet. Todd Deagle. Sorry, I said Invasion Fleet. Calm down, John. Calm down. And this one came first at an RTT. I will note this list is 5 points over the limit, which no one picked up on. But his Ripper Swarm points were the old points, not the new one.
Mm.
He has a Hive Tyrant with Adaptive. He's got the Neuro Tyrant. He's got 2x10 Hormigans. And one of the things we are seeing across a lot of lists, even the Vanguard ones on the list on the slide before, is these 2x10 Hormigans. People are really leaning into them instead of sometimes the Gargoyles. We've got a Biovore here. Of course, no Biovore in the Crusher Stampede list. Also interesting. 10 Genestealers, 2 Lictors, 2x3 Melee Warriors, which is a vibe. 6 Zoanthropes, a Ripper Swarm, 2 Exocrines, a Maliceptor, and 2 Screamer Killers. I think this is a great RTT list. This sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. I couldn't take this to a GT. I think there's so many variables here.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great RTT list. Wouldn't touch it. Wouldn't diversify quite as heavily. I also don't think Screamer Killers are that good personally. Over Carnifexes and Old One Eye. Having played the GT with Crusher Stampede and Old One Eye, like he would be literally the first thing to go in any invasion fleet list I now write. The unit does ridiculous amount of damage.
Oh, it's outstanding. It's outstanding. Here's a Screamer Killer 145. All One Eye 140. It's a no-brainer.
Old One Eye.
Well, One Eye all day long. So that for me says that honestly, Screamer Killers, I'd love to take them, but they need to be honestly 125, and then actual Carnifexes are so bad that they hit on 4s.
Yep.
That they need to be cheaper, because actually the old One Eye blob is good. It's really good, but is it 500 points good? And it's just shy of 500 points, right?
Mm.
That's a lot. That's a big night. I don't think it's as good as a big night.
Mm.
So, anyway, that's just my vibe. But I think this list is fun. It looks like Todd probably had a good time with it. And I'm sure as a few of his opponents was like, oh my God, what do all these things do? 2x3 Melee Warriors is super interesting. I guess they're projecting that Synapse perhaps, maybe alongside the Screamer Killers to kind of get them to strength 11, which would be pretty sweet. But yeah, super interesting. Mm-hmm. And then there's another invasion fleet list with Thad Benedict. He got 9th place at Boise. So I heard you like in Vanguard Onslaught, but you want to play invasion fleet. 2 Broodlords, a Neuro Tyrant, a Swarm Lord, 2x10 Hormigans, 2x5 Genestealers, 2 Lictors, 11 Neurogaunts, a non-emissary, 2 Rupture Effects, and 3 Exocrine. I feel like this guy's torn between Vanguard Onslaught and Invasion Fleet.
Yeah.
But it's very cool, man. I quite like it.
No, absolutely. It's fun. It's different. The Norn after the weekend has definitely increased in my appreciation for how good that model is. It's a good list.
Yeah.
Again, it's very much that whole identity crisis that we saw with some of the other lists. That it's like, what are you really trying to do with a lot of the units? And I think this one is kind of, I feel there's a lot of points that could be in other things, and could have built the list slightly more. Broodlord and 5 Genestealers, it doesn't do that much damage in comparison, because you also so yes, you have the critical 5s in melee, which can be really, really good. Is it better than a Maliceptor? Is it better than Old One Eye? Again, it comes down to this same question, right? What is the best thing to do? And I do like that. I do have a lot of respect for this list. The 2 Broodlord, 2 5 Genestealers, they do actually do a surprising amount of damage in Invasion Fleet if you can trigger the critical 5s, because you can now target both units with the stratagem because they're both under Synapse because of the Broodlord.
Yeah,
it is 2 CP, but with the Swarm Lord, it kind of counteracts that a little bit because you get the 2 CP every turn.
Yeah.
So these 2 units going in are going to be on critical 5s, which obviously increases their damage substantially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a solid list. Double Rupture T-Fex supported by 3 Exocrines. You're never going to go wrong in Invasion Fleet with stuff like that.
Do they reroll hits or wounds, the Genestealers, on objectives?
Reroll 1s to hit innately and reroll 1s to wound on objectives.
Yeah. I mean, when you're critting on 5s, if you do sustained...
Or lethals. Like, you can mess up tanks with that unit very quickly.
It's interesting, man. Very cool. I think this is one of those ones, if I was to try Invasion, I'd love to put this on the table and see how it goes. It seems really fun. You've got all that chunk we were talking about before, because Rupture factors are just chunky. They really do. I played Scrivo last night with his like a combat heavy Dark Angels army, and the T factors just did not die. Just kept going, kept plugging away, shooting stuff in combat. Loved it. So having those there is just super strong. So you've got this kind of joint thing of lots of, like the MSU kind of thing with the Hormigans and the Genestealers with the Broodlords. They give up Assassinate, which I'm not a big fan of, and 2 Lictors. But then behind it, you have got that chunk. So that seems to be a running theme of all these lists. It's we've got a phase 1, and then we try and own the midboard after that. Cool. All right, let's go on to the last piece. So this is what me and JP are doing. So we've got JP's Crusher list that he took and got 5th place at Conviction of Power. So JP, just talk us through your list and give us like the 5-minute synopsis.
The memes can't hurt you. Well, actually, the memes can hurt you, as this army showed. Like I said at the beginning, I actually didn't want to take this event too seriously. And I just thought, right, what do I want to play? I want to play Crusher. I've been playing Crusher in my local league. With the changes to UKTC, Crusher has honestly felt so good. Because when you're trying to deploy so many monsters, you're having to use a lot of the terrain to hide them. And just the ability to put stuff through walls is just, it's the good stuff. I absolutely swear by. So I basically looked at the list. I thought, what's going to be interesting to me? The Hive Tyrant Old One Icon Effect combo is very strong in any detachment that you can put it into. They do so much damage. That was my MVP unit of the whole tournament, was the Carnifexes and Old One Eye. The amount of times they just end up in combat for no reason on my opponent's turn, and Old One Eye would pick up half the opponent's unit. It was great. It was honestly really good. I wanted to try a Norn out. The theory was that it would stand on an objective and not die, and 4 of the 5 games, it literally just stood on an objective, never got shot, never died, and scored me a absolute bucket load of points. It scored on average per game, apart from the last one, which we don't talk about. It scored on average about 35 points on its own. And even though you're like, oh, it's 275 points and it doesn't really do any damage, it's like, yes, but it scored me 35 points and it's uncontestable. It's like, I have a lot of time for this. The Exocrines, I dropped down to 1 to put the Haruspecs in. Honestly, the Haruspecs was way better than I thought it was going to be. Would come in key positions and just absolutely mess up units.
Do you not have 2, no?
No, I only had 1 Haruspecs.
Oh, right, sorry. Ignore that on my slide, guys. It says 2.
So I had 2 Exocrines and 1 Haruspecs. So that's correct, and then 3 Maleceptors. Norn. I love Maleceptors at the moment. I think with the arm, with the meta going a bit more melee, they're great. They're really good. So for example, when I played against Flesh Terrors, Sunder Sanguinius, they committed their big Death Ball unit of Chaplain and 10 Jump Assault into Jump
Company.
Jump Death Company into a Maleceptor. Yeah, the Maleceptor died, but he had to dedicate the whole unit to it, and then they died in response. So the whole army just picked him up on the way back. It's just a very good army because your opponent had to kind of overcommit in melee, especially into Maleceptors, to do any damage to them. Yeah. And with the 1 CP strat to walk through the units, it then means that you can fall back out of combat onto an objective, which you can't do in any of the other detachments. And it's much harder to car park block yourself in Crusher when you can walk a unit through walls or walk a unit through an enemy unit that's move blocking you, and then you charge in with other ones to get you that space. My opponents definitely did significant less move blocking because I just said, sure, okay, but you have to keep your unit about 4 inches deep because I can advance through them. In the Hive Tyrant, given the assault shooting aura, so I really enjoyed it.
As well have the surge as well, so you can move block, sure, but don't shoot them.
Yeah, don't let them into melee. So that a lot of the games, the Carnifexes didn't go damaged in a lot of them, and even in the last round, when it was all going against me, the Carnifexes just absolutely shined, and they tore the guard. They literally tore the guard army apart. When we get to the run from the tournament, I can give you the death tally from the guard game. It was pretty ridiculous what they did. But no, it was great. I really enjoyed it. I will 100% be playing Crusher again. I will happily play this list again. It performed way above what I thought it was going to. I might mess around with some of the points and some of the units, but no, it was honestly awesome, and I'm really glad I played it.
Well, I think we don't have time for it today to go through everything, but maybe one if people want that, put it in the comments if you want to hear John's full tournament
It'll take
breakdown.
me 5 minutes. I'll do a quick synopsis and then go over the last game. That's fine.
Sure, go well, yeah, because I mean, one of the questions I'd like you to answer on this is so you were fifth, Christo was fourth, right?
Yep.
Your battle points 437. You dropped what 63?
Yeah.
His battle points, and this is not a slight on Christo. I just find this very interesting for an army of full monsters. He got 380, so that's a 57-point difference in battle points over 5 games. So you on average scored 10 more points a game. I think that's really interesting because Christo's army is so good at scoring.
Yep.
So how did you score with a bunch of monsters?
So there's a lot less actions when you actually get into the game. There's a lot less actions than you think there's going to be, and also you can cycle away a lot of the bad ones. So I very rarely did recover assets. I think I did it in one game. I
Just
very rarely did.
Recycle that card, man.
Yeah.
God,
Because you can do it every turn, right?
Card.
So I'd get rid of. I do sabotage because the Norn would just score me 3 points because it would stand on an object. It would stand on a ruin and go, "I'll sabotage this ruin. Good luck." So I score 3 points for that because you actually have to kill the model to stop it sabotaging. Cleanse is obviously great. You've got lictors, you've got monsters. You can generally move through ruins. The 8-inch move will generally get you from a ruin onto an objective, and in the occasions that you can't, the Norn's 10-inch movement will generally make that move, and then you do another one with a lictor, for example. And I just was able to because you can. I think this army would have really suffered in Leviathan because you weren't able to cycle away secondaries every turn.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of games where a lot of the games I was going through the majority of my deck and I saw the majority of the secondary cards. I would very regularly cycle away a secondary every single turn while still scoring. But because of the stat checking nature of the army, I could just get big scores against people because they just couldn't stop me from scoring points and holding primary. I went against Haristo, unfortunately, and against my first round opponent Dan with his Raven Guard. Like his anti-tank was limited to land 2 Storm Speeder Thunder Strikes, and Haristo was limited to some melee and other things. It was just one of those really unfortunate things where the army just
Super unfortunate, yeah, JP, yeah, super unfortunate, mate, yeah.
Oh, don't get
wrong about it.
But yeah, so basically, game 1 was against Raven Guard. I went first. I put the Norn on the center objective, and went, "Come, let's go. See what you can do." He's got no. So the first one was the Terraform. So I went on turn 1, terraformed with a Maleceptor behind a ruin, and terraformed with a Norn on the center objective. You can't take that objective off a 17 OC model very quickly. So I ended up just absolutely scoring the world out of that one. Round 2 played against my arch nemesis Sam and his Chaos Space Marines. I went first in Purge and managed to get the draw out of it. It's an incredibly hard mission, even with such a low model count army, to win versus CSM, the version that Sam plays, because
Super killy, right?
He's super killy and so am I. So you but it's also quite hard to score more. And it did come down a lot to secondaries. My cards weren't as good. Going first didn't help. So it ended up in a draw, which was kind of unfortunate, but I think it was kind of appropriate to the way the game went. It's twice now we've played, and I've gone first and we've drawn, so I'll take that as a positive. Round 3 was against Flesh Terrors and Sons of Sanguinius. Just the way the army plays, my opponent has to overcommit big resources because his little 5-man units just don't dent a Maleceptor, and the Maleceptor will kill most of the unit on the way back. So they have to commit their big Death Company bricks into me, which means that I can then return fire, pick them up in melee, and just outscore. Again, the Norn was great. It just sat on an objective all game and just didn't do anything.
Yep.
So 2-0-1 at the end of day 1. Then day 2.
Yeah. So by the way, just for context with John's wins here, 96 points game 1, the full hundo game 3, and the game he drew, an 80-point draw, is savage. So super high scoring. Sorry, John, carry on.
So then day 2 played into Haristo. We had spoken the day before, ironically, about it, where we both agreed that in theory, if you just put the armies on paper, Crusher Stampede has a huge advantage over Vanguard Onslaught because you just stat check them, and Genestealer's a full 40 attack Genestealer unit with Broodlord needing dev wounds. I think it does about half the wounds to a Maleceptor. It's just not a reliable way to do lethal damage to the monsters. Because you've got 5-up saves or 4-up saves, or it's just dev wounds, and in which case the Norn just goes, fantastic, I've got a 4-up save. So unfortunately, we got to... and Haristo, to be fair, played really well. He scored his secret mission. After turn 2, the game was kind of over for the win because I'd been able to go first. I put a Norn on one objective, a Maleceptor on the other, scored, and then started guarding them with these 2 units. And he could never really contest because putting out one of his Genestealer bricks is just going to die because it won't kill the Maleceptor. It then holds itself to get shot by everything else, and the Norn just kind of stood around doing things. I positioned my Carnifexes really well, which would allow me to overwatch any gargoyles coming down to contest the Norn's objective because they're the only thing in the army that can. So that kind of worked out quite well for me. The terrain was really useful. UKTC terrain right now is really nice for close range monsters because you can actually draw some interesting lines and not get shot back. And so basically, the end of my turn 5, and I went first. The score was at that point in the game. The score was 91-29.
Oof.
Now, admittedly, Haristo scored about 30 points in the final turn with secret mission secondaries and stuff. But basically, I went first, and I gave Haristo a 0 on primary for everything up until turn 5.
Yeah, it's a rough matchup, right? We said this in the Vanguard Onslaught video. One of Vanguard Onslaught's worst matchups are Tyranids because all the other detachments just bully them a bit. But what Vanguard are really good at, in my opinion, is Blood Angels and things like that. They just outrange them and go, okay, well, you come and stand near me, and then I'll charge you, and I'll get to fight first, and all that jazz. Yeah, really interesting, man. I think what they don't like is knights and big monsters and stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure, absolutely. And then, unfortunately, round 5, it did end up being a loss. I think had I gone first, so I think we talked it out at the end. I think if I go first and the laws of averages apply, I likely win that game because I can just set up and deny so much for my opponent. But basically, they went first. To say that it went badly from the start is an understatement. So his Vanquisher managed to move around the corner, draw line of sight to my Maleceptor. I failed every single invulnerable save, plus the re-rolls, and got one shot by a Vanquisher, which is highly unlikely when you have a re-rollable 4-up invulnerable save, and they have to hit and wound.
Yeah.
And then they rolled the 6 to hit, which auto-wounded. I rolled a 3, re-rolled it into a 3. They then did 12 damage with the... Sorry, they did 10 damage with the Vanquisher Cannon. Then shot the Hunter-Killer Missile. I failed that 4-up invulnerable save, and it died. I'm like, cool. Fantastic. I'm like, fine. Okay, I've lost a Maleceptor. We're still in the game. Moved the Norn up. The Norn had a 6-inch re-rollable charge into 10 Catachans and failed. So that was not great. So we were scoring. We started going. I'm like, okay, cool, fine. His turn 2, a Vanquisher. I actually managed to make it. His Vanquisher shot my Norn. Rolled the 4-up invulnerable save. Failed it. Re-rolled it. Failed it. Took 9 damage. Took 12 damage from the Vanquisher Cannon and passed 3 Feel No Pains. Okay, cool. So I've taken 9. Cool. He then missed with the las. I think I saved the las cannon, and the plasma cannons didn't do anything because they're just unreliable. It's toughness 11. I'm like, cool, no worries. So you've only got a battle tank left. So his battle tank loads up with its back. So the battle cannon does 5. The battle cannon somehow does 6 wounds to my Norn. I'm like, okay, cool. That's fine. I'm on a 3-up save. I've got cover. I pass 1 3-up armor save, taking another 15 damage, of which I pass 1 Feel No Pain, and the Norn dies.
Oh, mate.
And I'm like, okay. So at this point, and Shannon will attest, it had been an absolute train wreck. My dice were so much against me. However, I scored 66 points in that game.
Yeah, still good.
Because Old One and the Carnifex Brood killed about 1,000 points of Imperial Guard on their own. They killed 6 of the Bullgrim. They killed 30 Catachans. They killed a Lehman Russ, a Lehman Russ Vanquisher, a Earthshaker Battery, and killed a Chimera as well. There's about 1,000 points of guard on one unit, because the challenge that Martin had was because of the Carnifexes were in the middle of the board, he had to contest objectives, which meant that he could never shoot them, because if he did shoot them, they just run into combat with something.
Yeah.
And it's like, so I've just got this unit that's running around basically at will. And it was just one of those games.
So one of the questions I had about this, are the Death Spitters the right choice, John?
100%.
100%, yeah?
So against guard tanks, you literally do no damage on powers. The AP is really important, especially when you can do more.
Oh, your mic's gone again, mate. Sorry.
Can I hear me now?
Yeah, all good.
So the AP is really important when you can give them ignores cover. And basically it means that your wound, like most things have a 5-up save, and even stuff with a 2-up save goes to a 4-up. It means that kind of Armor of Contempt is kind of really stretched against your army. So by having another and 24 shots is enough.
Yeah.
They just, I mean, old One Eye tore things apart all weekend long. He killed a carnivore. He one-shot a carnivore. He one-shot an exocrine. He one-shot a Lehman Russ battle tank when it got into... Like, this guy just, honestly, the model does ridiculous amounts of damage. I have never played a model do as much damage as old One Eye does. If he touches anything, it just dies, and it's just honestly comical. But it was just the fact in that game, because I lost the Norn and I lost the Maleceptor sort of against... Like, I think there's like a 5% chance the Norn dies to what it did, and it died, and I'm like, all right, cool, let's see what we can do. I pulled it back to probably, I think it was like a 14-6 loss if it was in teams, which after how the game started, I was really happy with. I think had I have gone first, I more than likely win that game. It's just kind of unfortunate that things went against me so badly in the first couple of turns, and my cards were also rubbish. But I played it out and I scored 66. I was super proud of it. I was super happy with the list, and the fact that this list, which was meant to be kind of a quote-unquote fun one, actually turned out to be super competitive into a lot of really good opponents and really good armies. And I think the biggest thing for me, and we were talking about it before we started, how I set up and deployed, I'd make small changes. I wouldn't deploy the Biovore or the Pyrovore because it just gives them the indirect some random targets, because the indirect pieces, the Earthshaker Battery, or the Earthshaker Carriage and the Basilisk just don't do damage to monsters. They'll do like 2-4 wounds, if that. Yeah. Because it's...
Which you want.
It's indirect, exactly. It's literally tickle damage to make you better. So it was kind of one of those ones where, when I look back at it, I think that I would, if I deployed again, I would not deploy the Biovore and the Pyrovore, but I would deploy everything else exactly the same way, 100 games out of 100. So I don't feel bad about how that game went. I lost to random variants in a number of I didn't lose the game to random variants. I lost some of my models to kind of the averages just not being there, and it's a dice game and these things happen. But the fact that I would play the same way and deploy the same way kind of makes me realize that I probably didn't do anything wrong, and it's just unfortunate scenario that put me to the way I did. So I was super happy with how I played, and 100% would play the army again. The Norn Emissary really stood out as a unit that I definitely would consider playing constantly. It's just a big body that, even though it's 275 points, it doesn't die. You need to dedicate like real resources for multiple turns to kill it, and at that point I'm like, cool, here's all my other monsters that aren't now being shot.
Yeah, I see that. Oh man, it's so many points. So well, it's great that it went really well for you, and as I say, it's really funny we've managed to gaslight ourselves into believing Crusher could be absolutely awesome.
It is awesome, Davey. You've got to
it is quite good.
So here's the interesting thing, because of the way that it's worded, and you'll have to, and I need to double check how it's worded. If it's worded the way I think it does, is even if you walk through a wall and battle shock yourself, you still have OC.
Why?
Because it adds 2 OC.
All right, it's a modifier, yeah. So you'd end up with 2 OC. Yeah, that's a good point.
Or 12 if you're a Norn.
Or 12 if you're a Norn. Yeah, and Paul Evans here says in the chat, it's so much fun. It really is. Like, Crusher is really fun. And you can build like loads of lists and just it's just fun running monsters through walls. When I went into Barcelona, put the Swarm Lord and 6 Tyrant Guard through a wall, and then a Hive Tyrant after that. Like, it is a lot of fun. I've got my next iteration of something else I'm trying in Crusher Stampede coming up next weekend, which is very different to what you've got. However, this is just me trying something. I want to see if this is good or not. I've had one game with it again against Scrivo last night, and it was quite interesting. So I wanted a detachment where I could take 2 Winged Hive Tyrants. I own 2 Winged Hive Tyrants. I really like Winged Hive Tyrants. You can hide Winged Hive Tyrants now. And here's the thing, then they're really good in a melee matchup because they -1 attack. So my thinking was I start one on the battlefield. I set up a position where, okay, you can come and charge my unit that's on an objective, i.e. a Psychophage or a Maleceptor, right? Difficult to kill stuff. Put it on the objective, my opponent charges it in view of one of the Winged Hive Tyrants. The other one, Rapid Ingress, is in, so it can see that detachment, or see that combat, sorry, and then -2s their attacks. And John charged in with some attack 5, or something with 5 attacks each coming in, and then they went down to 3 attacks and then totally bounced. And I was like, yes, I'm doing the thing. So it was a lot of fun. The reason as well that I want to try Winged Hive Tyrants in this detachment is when I played Crusher in Barcelona, I found the speed of a lot of the monsters absolutely crippling. So I wanted to try monsters that were faster. So T-Fexes, movement 9 rather than movement 8. Got the Winged Hive Tyrants at movement 12, which is obviously very good. And then the rest of it is just, what there is. I also wanted a Trigon in there just to turn my opponent around. I feel like Crusher sometimes plays very fair 40k. Here I am, I'm right in front of you, you can come and fight me, and we'll have a fair fight. I want a 3-inch deep strike monster that I can put and just put it where you don't want it, and then you can deal with it. Put it in view of like one thing that shoots it, does 3 wounds to it, and it goes, oh, now I'm angry, and just hits on 2s with 12 attacks. Because I've had a lot of back and forth on this list. For example, Winged Hive Tyrants, they hit on 2s, right? They don't care if they're hurt until they're half damage, and then they're +1 to wound, which broadly speaking, the things they want to fight, they're going to be winning on 2s anyway. So they don't really benefit from the detachment rule as much as I'd like them to. Same with an Acid Fex. What's the point in +1 to hit if you automatically hit? Like, there's a lot of things that I've thought about here, but this is, the Acid Fex, I really wanted another Tyrannofex in there, but I didn't want a Rupture. I wanted some Overwatch threat, which I thought was pretty cool here with that. The Trigon, as I've mentioned already. Trigon's a funny one because you've got a Winged Hive Tyrant, which is 6 attack, strength 9, -2, 3 damage. Or you can have a Trigon, which is 12 attacks with the same profile, but without Synapse. So I was like, do we put another Trigon in there? Like, why have Winged Hive Tyrants when you can just put loads of Trigons? But I do like the -1 attack thing, and I love the speed of them. And I just love the models as well, which is pretty cool. Psychophages are just cheap monsters. They've got the keyword cheap, which I really like. And then they obviously benefit from all the tank shocks and things like that, which is quite handy. They just really get in the way as well. Your opponent will charge one thing, then fall back and charge something else or whatever. Having these cheap monsters there just to get in the way is really handy. And when they get +1 to wound, it's something, it's not nothing. It can be quite okay. Maleceptors, I would love to have 2 Maleceptors in, but I feel like they do the same role as the Tyrannofexes. They go and stand in the middle, and they go absorb shots. So for me, I think you take Tyrannofexes or Maleceptors. I wanted to try Tyrannofexes because I haven't tried them in a long, long time. I've got the Biovore because I want to screen out my backfield. So that's kind of what it does for the first 2 turns, unless there's a really good behind enemy lines opportunity or engage opportunity. But generally, it's going into corners where a monster wants to leave, and it screens out there. So we'll see what happens, man. I've took the gargoyles specifically, actually, because I measured out a few of the maps. So I start with one squad of gargoyles on the battlefield and 1 in the sky. The gargoyles go behind the big L because it's UKTC terrain, and they will then be able to get to my opponent's objective turn 1. So I can just go and deny their primary. Fine. I couldn't do that with Hormigants because they'd need a 3-inch advance, and I just know that I'm going to roll a 1 or a 2. So I did have 2 Hormigants, 1 gargoyle. I've had to go to 2 gargoyles, 1 Hormigant. So the Hormigants then just basically fill in when those gargoyles die and just replace them. So I'm constantly putting something on my opponent's objective to deny it. That's on the same wing as probably going to be a Psychophage and an Exocrine. So, you know, there's enough chaff there, enough stuff just to throw it into your opponent's safe objective. So that's what I'm thinking. But we'll see. It's a pretty stacked field. A lot of the Toys of Mass Destruction guys are there, and they're very good. We've got a lot of the guys from 3D3, also very handy at 40k. So it's going to be an interesting RTT. This is me warming up for the Hellstorm event at the end of August, trying to figure out what the hell I'm going to take to that. Because I don't want it to be World Eaters, guys. I want to take Tyranids. I really do. But I'm just trying to find something that I feel really powerful playing. So we shall see. Cool. All right. And I think that's the end of the show, John. Have you got anything else to add before we sign off?
Nope, nothing for me.
Groovy. All right. Well, we will see you. Well, I will see you in 2 weeks. John's away on holiday. How dare he? But in 2 weeks' time, we will see you then. All right, guys. Have a great one, and we'll catch you next time. Ta-ra.
Take care.